Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo O on March 10th, 2023. Excited to be back in the house of devotion with you. I was gone yesterday. Up on the mountain and enjoying that day. It was nice, beautiful up in Flagstaff, by the way. Really nice, cool weather. Still a bunch of snow on the hill, beautiful skiing, and really a blessing for me to be able to meet an old friend and catch up and really talk about what God's doing in our lives, and that, man, what great fellowship. I mean, who would have thought that me and him and I would both be wanting to follow Jesus, and learning how to give our lives to him daily, which is always a trying to resist things and moving away from things and moving towards other things that are good, and but it's a daily thing, right? Daily temptations, daily trials, but wonderful to see how God's using him powerfully. And boy, man, he's got a good mind on him, that's for sure. So we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 20 today. And Paula, thanks so much that you dig the music. I do too. I always love that kind of mellow, cool stuff. So good having you in the house of Devo today, and always praying for you and hoping you're well. We're kind of in the life of Israel, kind of in this kind of national relationship between, Israel, and specifically the northern tribes of Israel, and their relationship with the prophet or the prophets. And the prophets really come to the forefront now in our narrative of the Bible, where instead of focusing so much on the king, it's a focus on the king's relationship with the prophets or the prophet. And so it's kind of like, the prophet is that spokesperson for Yahweh to the king. The kings have abandoned going to the tent of meeting. Remember that place where they were to go and to meet with God? It was a specific place, and God had reasons for that. You couldn't just approach God in any way. You had to go through if you will, the prescribed method to be able to draw near to God. And that's what offering means, to draw near. In order to come to God, you must bring a certain kind of sacrifice. And should I say sacrifices? And we learned that there was steps to the sacrifices to bring one into peace with Yahweh, with God. And so this is kind of what was abandoned by the kings. And so that's where we continue in this really long kind of chapter of these issues with nations now. And it says, at that time, King Ben-Hadad of Aram, okay, so not of Israel, but of Aram, it says, mobilized his army, supported by the chariots and horses of 32 allied kings. They went to besiege Samaria, northern tribes of Israel. And it says, the capital of Israel, and launched attacks against it. So we see here, it's wartime, right? And it says, Ben-Hadad sent messengers into the city to relay his message to King Ahab of Israel. So King Ahab is that king of Israel, Samaria being the capital. And Ahab being that king that has done some gnarly, if you will, institutions, has made, in a sense, pagan universities, has made the universities of Israel, instead of those of following God and helping people understand why there's festivals of the Lord, why we go down to the Ark of the Covenant and worship at the temple and all this stuff. instead, he made institutions that were really geared to worship other gods. So it moved everybody from worshiping the true and living God to worship false deities, right? Gods that are no gods at all. And so that's who Ahab is. So, and this is what Ben-Hadad sent messengers to say to Ahab. This is what Ben-Hadad says: your silver and gold are mine, and so are your wives and the best of your children. Interesting. Your wives too. Maybe Jezebel wasn't Ahab's only wife. Maybe he had a lot of wives, but Jezebel just was the main one. It says, all right, my lord the king, Israel's king replied, all that I have is yours. Interesting, right? Have you ever just kind of given in to someone before? Hey, I'm just gonna, this is too difficult. I'm just gonna give in to it. It's like, man, if you want that, here you go, kind of attitude. It's an interesting attitude to have, but I think it's one that is maybe done because we're just tired, right? It says, soon Ben-Hadad's messengers returned again and said, this is what Ben-Hadad says: I have already demanded that you give me all your gold, silver, wives, and children, but about this time tomorrow I will send my officials to search your palace and your homes of your people, and they will take away everything you consider valuable. Maybe when we concede because we're tired, maybe things don't get better, but maybe things now get what? Worse. Man, so true, right? Maybe it's not good to just concede to someone who's, demanding something, saying, you should be this way, da-da-da-da-da, you better give me da-da-da-da-da, that kind of thing, instead of just saying, oh, okay, and just giving in. Maybe we need to kind of grow a backbone a little bit. I know sometimes I do. And, and just be like, hey, no, that's not a right attitude to have. Like, I'm not going that direction. Like, why would I concede to your demands? Yeah, you might be powerful. Yeah, you might be bigger. Yeah, that kind of thing. But it's not right that I concede to you because you're going to use your power structure to implement it, right? That's a tough lesson, right? Even we see this in governments all the time, where they use their power structures, right, to, in a sense, use coercion to get people to do things, right? They force people to do something that is against their will, right? It's not what they want to do, but yet they got their reasons, and Ben-Hadad has his reasons too, of why he's doing this. And I'm sure it sounded good to him and his counselors, and they were maybe more of the big boys on in the block, at the junior high. And they were going to force their way. God help us to be strong, to stand up when we need to, and to set up boundaries when we need to. It says, then Ahab summoned all the elders of the land and said to them, look how this man is stirring up trouble. I already agreed with his, let me read this, demand that I give him my wives and children and silver and gold. Don't give in any more to his demands, all the elders and the people advised. Whoa. So the elders said, hey, don't give in. Don't just buy into that. Stay strong, stay firm, in your confidence, So really there is a precedent for us to not, concede just to everybody's whim, what they desire, but really to evaluate that, when should I concede to someone and when should I draw a boundary? Well, that's something I need to pray about and really seek wisdom. Is it something that's, I see I'm enabling someone just to exercise their, just to do what they do, right? Just to become, people that are, am I enabling their bitterness or their anger? Am I enabling them to walk in that, horrible way still by conceding? Then maybe it's probably not the good thing to do, right? Maybe I just need to turn around and walk away, right? So Ahab told messengers from Ben-Hadad, say this to my lord the king, I will give you everything you ask for the first time, but I cannot accept this last demand of yours. So the messenger returned to Ben-Hadad with that response. And it says, Ben-Hadad sent this message to Ahab: may the gods strike me and even kill me if there remains enough dust from Samaria to provide even a handful for each of my soldiers. The king of Israel sent an answer back: a warrior putting on his sword for battle should not boast like a warrior who has already won. And the king of Israel, and then it says, Ahab's reply reached Ben-Hadad and the other kings as they were drinking in their tents, prepared to attack. Ben-Hadad commanded his officers, so they prepared to attack the city. Wow, it sounds like some kind of, show, some kind of series, right? These volleys of official, presidential, responses to one another. It's like, oh man, the intensity is building, And it says, then a certain prophet came to see King Ahab. Oh, here we go. Now we're introduced to a certain prophet. And he says, this is what the Lord says. Do you see these enemy forces? Today I will hand them all over to you. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Ahab asked, how will he do it? And the prophet replied, this is what the Lord says. The troops of the provincial commanders will do it. Should we attack first? Ahab asked. Yes, the prophet answered. So Ahab mustered the troops of the 232 provincial commanders. Then he called out the rest of the army of Israel, some 7,000 men. About noontime, as Ben-Hadad had the 32 allied kings were still in their tents, drinking themselves into a stupor, the troops of the provincial commanders marched out of the city at the first contingent. As they approached, Ben-Hadad's scouts reported to him, some troops are coming from Samaria. Take them alive, Ben-Hadad commanded, whether they have come for peace or for war. It's kind of sad that Ben-Hadad, didn't think much, obviously, of Ahab, or definitely of Israel, Israel's army. So much so that they kind of just, they treat it as trivial. Sometimes we respond to someone by not conceding and say, hey, we're going to set up a boundary. And what do? They think what we're doing is lame, right? They kind of push us aside. You're just blah, 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 blah. You're nothing, that kind of thing. And people have that kind of attitude. Okay, there's nothing we can do. If that's your attitude, I guess. It's not a good one. It's certainly not a real biblical one. The fruit of the Spirit is what? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Yeah. And a lot of times that bully is just not that way. They just don't have the fruit of the Spirit in them, And here you see Ben-Hadad. He's demanding everything, but he don't care about Israel, and he's not thinking of them at all, of course. He sees them as nothing. And so it says, but Ahab's provincial commanders and the entire army had now come out to fight. Each Israelite soldier killed his Aramean opponent, and suddenly the entire Aramean army panicked and fled. The Israelites chased them, but King Ben-Hadad had a few of his charioteers escaped on horses. However, the king of Israel destroyed the other horses and chariots and slaughtered the Arameans. Afterward, the prophet said to King Ahab, get ready for another attack. Begin making plans now, for the king of Aram will come back next spring. So let's see what's going to happen. And the reason why this is so interesting in the narrative that we're reading is Ahab has been a pretty against Yahweh king. So it's interesting that it seems like there's some grace being given to Ahab. Right? A victory in war? Whoa. Interesting. Let's read on, see what happens. After their defeat, Ben-Hadad's officers said to him, the Israelite gods are gods of the hills. That's why they won. but we can beat them easily on the plains. Only this time, replace the kings with field commanders. Recruit another army like the one you lost. Give us the same numbers of horses, chariots, and men, and we will fight them on the plains. There's no doubt that we will beat them. So King Hadad did as they suggested. Hey, those Israelite people, they worship a god of the mountains. You know, they're up there in the cracks and the crevices. And you know that Moses guy, remember him back in the day? He kind of hung out in a cleft of the rock. And, you know, God, Elijah goes up in the cleft of the rock. Maybe they're, you know, that's where they kind of go. That's what they're used to. We got to meet them in the plains and then we get them. That's where our tactics will work. So the following spring, he called up the Aramean army and marched out against Israel, this time at Aphek. And Israel then mustered its army, set up supply lines, and marched out for battle. But the Israelite army looked like two little flocks of goats in comparison to the vast Aramean forces that filled the countryside. And this is how it is sometimes in our personal lives when we're facing someone who's just not that nice, right? They could seem huge. It can seem so big. They can seem giant, where in our day, that's what takes up our mind, is this vast army. And man, boy, we really need to focus on God at that point, right? Because that army can look so big in our minds that it really takes up probably too much attention in our brains. And so it says, then the man of God went to the king of Israel and said, "This is what the Lord says." So here we see the prophet again, the relationship between prophet and the king. It says, the Arameans have said, the Lord is a God of the hills and not of the plains. So I will defeat the vast army for you. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Notice it's always about knowing God. Then you will know. God demonstrates something, and then we know. See, faith isn't just some blind faith, right? It isn't just some faith in nothing, right? Biblical faith is always based on something that happens, meaning we call that evidence. Something that we see, right? We don't just believe to believe. I used to think that all the time when I was an atheist, right? Always used to just bash Christians. Oh, you guys just have blind faith. You guys just believe in fairy tales. It's like Santa Claus, or, you know, just make up stuff. I didn't know what I was talking about. Never read the Bible. I must say, absolutely ignorant. If I did read the Bible, I read it with such a bent in my brain that I missed probably most of it, you know, just to get to the part that I wanted to bring out and kind of get at people with. You know, oh man, just twisted, right? Twisted in the mind. But notice it's so that you may know, right? That you may know what? That Yahweh is the Lord. That God is real. That God is real. That's the point. The reason why God does things the way he does is so that you may know that he is real, right? The reason why Jesus Christ came is so that you may know God. This is the point. He has come to reveal the Father, right? John wrote in the New Testament, I write this so that you may know, right? Yeah, you may know. You may have a confidence that this is true, right? It's based on evidence. Things that happen in history. That's right. You know, so this is the whole thing about faith. It's not trusting in something that, oh, well, I don't know what's, you know, what, you know, this kind of vague, you know, ethereal, you know, just kind of step out into the darkness thing. No, it's a step into the light based on what has happened. And so this is how God's working. The two armies camped opposite each other for 7 days, and on the seventh day the battle began. The Israelites killed 100,000 Aramean foot soldiers in one day. Wow. The rest fled into the town of Aphek, but the wall fell on them and killed another 27,000. Ben-Hadad fled into the town and hid in a secret room. So a lot of times God's evidence is on historical things that have happened, and it's without a shadow of a doubt pretty amazing. And so that's what we call a miracle in a lot of ways, right? Something that is abnormal, something that it seems so supernatural, or is supernatural. It's not of the it doesn't seem like it doesn't happen every day. right? And so it's radical, right? God uses this army of Israel, this small army, and they defeat this big army. Now, this has happened even in our modern day when it comes to Israel as well. Think about how small Israel is. Think of how tiny that country is. Wow. And then you think of their past wars. Amazing. Just go through the last 100 years of their wars, and you'll be amazed. Ben-Hadad's officers said to him, "Sir, we have heard that the king of Israel are merciful, so let's humble ourselves by wearing burlap around our waist and putting ropes on our heads, and surrender to the king of Israel. Then perhaps he will let you live." So they put burlap on and ropes, and they went to the king of Israel and begged. "Your servant Ben-Hadad says, please let us live." The king of Israel responded, "Is he still alive? He is my brother." Then the men took this as a good sign and quickly picked up on his words. "Yes," they said, "your brother Ben-Hadad." Interesting. "Go and get him," the king of Israel told them. And when Ben-Hadad arrived, Ahab invited him into his chariot. Ben-Hadad told him, "I will give you back the towns my father took from your father, and you may establish places of trade in Damascus, as my father did in Samaria." Then Ahab said, "I will release you under these conditions." So they made a new treaty, and Ben-Hadad was set free. Ahab has mercy on Ben-Hadad. Now, why? Was it because God had mercy on Ahab, and that's how he was looking at things? Maybe not so pure of a thing, right? Maybe there was a lot more going on. Maybe not such a good thing with Ahab. But it's interesting that God seems to have this grace upon Ahab during this time of winning these battles against the Aramean people. Ahab personally, does he get changed? Does he change his tune? Does he look at this and go, "Hey, you know what? This is so I may know Yahweh, and so I'm going to put away these idols to Baal"? Well, we're just going to have to see how Ahab's life kind of pans out. Meanwhile, the Lord instructed one of the groups of prophets to say to another man, "Hit me." The man refused to hit the prophet. Then the prophet told him, "Because you have not obeyed the voice of the Lord, a lion will kill you as soon as you leave me." And when he had gone, the lion attacked him and killed him. Interesting. Then the prophet turned to another man and said, "Hit me." So he struck the prophet and wounded him. The prophet placed a bandage over his eyes to disguise himself and then waited beside the road for the king. As the king passed by, the prophet called out to him, Sir, I was in the thick of battle, and suddenly a man brought me a prisoner. He said, "Guard this man, for if for any reason he gets away, you will either die or pay a fine of 75 pounds of silver." But while I was busy doing something else, the prisoner disappeared. "Well, it's your fault," the king replied, "if you have brought the judgment on yourself." Then the prophet quickly pulled the bandage from his eyes, and the king of Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. The prophet said to him, "This is what the Lord says, because you have spared the man I said must be destroyed. Now you must die in his place, and your people will die instead of his people." So the king of Israel went home to Samaria, angry and sullen. So Ahab was really big, obviously, on pleasing Ben-Hadad and making treaty with the Aramean people. But he wasn't so big, and that's what really this last story's about, this last little narrative part, is he really wasn't big on what? Really focusing on pleasing God. Isn't that interesting? He was focused, even though God was gracious on Ahab in these military victories, we see Ahab, instead of really doing what he should have done, instead, what does he do? He cozies up to it, and he allows it just to continue to go, and he doesn't just knock it out. He doesn't just defeat it. Wow, that is a devo in our lives, is it not? Allowing something to continue and not just knocking it out, right? there's a lot there to think about just personally in our lives. And, the prophet's relationship to the king here is one of, are you going to obey God, Ahab? Or are you going to try to just be at peace with, the bullies of the world? Are you going to try to just please people? Or are you really wanting to please God? And that really is a good way to end our Devo is, hey, Bo, me, do I want to please God more than people? Or am I trying to please people? Am I afraid of people? So I'm conceding all the time to people instead of really just doing what the Lord has called me to do and doing it. Very good. Man, a lot of stuff to think about. But that's what Devos are about. And it's so cool that we can go through the Bible and get so much good stuff, right? Wow. We see governments don't change much, but we have an opportunity, in the way we react to whether it's governmental things or whether it's just personal things, personal people in our lives, and looking within and seeing where we're at. And are we really doing the right things? So beautiful. Love it. You guys have a great day. Enjoy the weekend. Okay? It's beautiful out there. Bye-bye.